Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 78 of Makai-World Reviews. Who am I? Well, I am the Tony Makai, master of minds and men. Not sure why they don't say women in there. I didn't write it. Blame Thor. We're at the end of Werner Herzog month, and we're at a film I've never really heard talked about in regards to him, and one with a pretty bland title called Invincible. Not unlike the animated series and the comic book that the animated series was based on, but it's nothing like that at all. So let's go ahead and find out what it is like. But before we begin, of course, click that pretty red button that says subscribe. Go on, do it, then we can move on. Isn't that what you'd like? Invincible, directed by Werner Herzog, who also wrote the film. He's the man, the myth, the legend, Shribbly Pibbles himself, highly touted, highly controversial, mostly in his personal life. A fantastic director, but somewhat inconsistent, as we found out this month. Either way, a man who I'm a fan of and I'm glad to get to talk about for the whole month. Thank you, Werner. Starring Tim Roth, I'd say worldwide famous British actor known for his frequent collaborations with Mr. Quentin Tarantino, such as Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Four Rooms, and The Hateful Eight, of which I only really enjoyed Reservoir Dogs out of that list, to be frank. But Tim has done a literal ton of other movies. I'm sure there is something you've seen him in that you've enjoyed. And Joku Olha, a Finnish strongman who is big and strong. He's done a few movies, but mostly he's just strong. Release date for this was March 29th, 2001. What came out the same week as this? Why, it's Tom Cats. This is a comedy I've unfortunately seen starring Jerry O'Connell and Jake Busey. What do you mean the guy from Sliders and Gary Busey's son aren't funny? Well, they aren't, and it's not. A mind-numbingly bad film to watch. It not only didn't age well, it was bad when it came out. And The Serpent's Kiss, a middling Ewan McGregor vehicle about a Dutch architect. It's a romance garden film. Not that bad and not very good either. I probably wouldn't recommend it. Moving on to the plot, we meet blacksmith and strongman Zysha in Poland in a semi-Jewish community circa 1932. That's nothing ominous about that at all, huh? He has a predictably big family with a fondness for his much younger brother, Benjamin. Zysha has saved up enough money to eat in a restaurant with his brother, though they are harassed by some rowdy anti-Jewish patrons. But he quickly dispatches the men and literally goes Donkey Kong on them, throwing barrels of booze around. But now he has to pay for the damages to the restaurant and to the booze. To do this, he goes to a circus to challenge a strong man for some prize money, which he handedly does. His reputation grows, and he's visited by a manager who advises him to go to Berlin for work. Though initially hesitant, it's decided the money would help him and his family, and he's convinced. After some meandering, he arrives in Berlin, and he gets booked at a place called Hanhausen's Place of the Occult. No, not Danhausen, Hanhausen. Hanhausen is a fake psychic and clairvoyant who aspires to be a high-ranking member of the National Socialist Party. Goody. And Zysha is rebranded as an Aryan Superman, Siegfried, and he plays larger to a Nazi audience. He is a huge hit, despite his really awful blonde wig. And of course, Hanhausen does his fake seance and false mysticism and whatnot, which are the main attractions. Hanhausen is also in an abusive relationship with Marta, the pianist, who Zysha takes quite quickly as a friend, and perhaps more. Zysha also has prophetic dreams, which will become important later, sort of. And the routine commences. Strong guy lifts heavy things, fake mystic guy does fake mystic guy stuff, to increasingly bigger houses, and of course, more Nazis. Eventually, Zysha has had enough, and he renounces his Aryan nature, declaring himself the new Samson, a strong Jew for the New Ages. Well, this goes over like you might expect, and he's fired on the spot by Hanhausen, who then makes light of Zysha's abilities and makes them seem like a mere gimmick or trick. Well, the local Jews love this, welcoming Zysha into their arms. And so does Hanhausen, surprisingly, because he can make a lot of money off of this now that the local Jewish community enjoys it. But after a show where both Goebbels and Himmler are at, the Nazis and Jews break into a brawl and things go down from there. On a boat trip, there is a dispute between Hanhausen and Marta, with Zysha interfering, almost killing Hanhausen, leading to a trial where Zysha accuses Hanhausen of being a fake, and with Marta's testimony, we find out Hanhausen is actually a Czech Jew. Zysha and Hanhausen make amends before the brown shirts take Hanhausen out and kill him, of course. Zysha returns home to Poland, trying to tell his people about the dreams he is having of the oncoming Holocaust and the way the Nazis acted, but no one believes him. He then gets a cut in his leg, which gets infected, and he dies. Last thing we see is him dreaming of his brother Benjamin flying away from the oncoming horrors. So let's talk about the directing first. Since this is Werner's month, I think it's only fair to talk about that part of the film, his part of the film, and it was middling, it was fine. But there was nothing about it that screams of Werner Herzog. It's a fairly generic film, in almost every capacity, and really has none of the strange charm or loose flowing nature we expect from him, and he is known for. The issues with ambition were on point here, with Danhausen and Zeisha both wanting more in varying degrees for themselves, or their people in the case of Zeisha. But really, it just feels like a movie that was going through the motions, including the directing. As a guy who was known for getting the most out of his actors, he did accomplish that, but to what end? As far as acting goes, Junko Oha actually did a very good job. All things considered, for a guy who has no real acting experience, he did everything he could to bring a quiet stoicism, as well as being sincere in the parts where his faith is discussed. He was believable, likable, and overall very sweet. He's excited to help his family. He's bumbling kind of fool where he can't really use a phone. He's appropriately awkward in parts with Marta, and he's impressive in his physical parts. His facial expressions could use a lot of work, but for what it was, he gives more than a serviceable performance. The guy who played the dad is also impressively big, for the record. Tim Roth, to the surprise of no one, was the best thing about the film. He's a mixture of cruel, cowardly, but ultimately sort of understandable in many ways. He stood out, as well as pretty much he's the only other character in the movie, really. But he would stand out anyways. Tim has always a way of making simple characters seemingly bare-bone ones, having a lot of depth to them, with his facial expressions, body language, and general understanding of human nature. I would have kind of liked to see more of his fall mysticism, as outside of a few, seance-style things, we only get this one gimmick of him burning a coin into, a lady's hand. I don't know. There was a lot more to him that we didn't get to see. No real standout scenes or moments or anything that I could really point out. Besides some reasonably impressive feats of strength, there are no moments where I took note. Marta is a useless character designed to move the plot along to its inevitable conclusion. The conflict is virtually non-existent, and I am at a lack of things to say about this, frankly. Mediocre piece of cinema. Soundtrack, once again, average, at best. It's presented nothing but things you might have heard. Light pieces for the light moments, heavier for the darker ones. But they all just kind of ran together in kind of a boring mess. Unimpressive and unexciting as far as the music goes. Overall, if it wasn't clear, this movie wasn't my favorite. It didn't do anything we've not seen before, and in fact was lesser to a lot of other films that have treaded the same ground, especially the World War II ground. It wasn't bad by any means, but mediocre, average, and in places slightly boring. The plot moves along like a checklist, but in between are scenes of virtually nothing happening, sort of mulling about, Zeisha walking or talking, about nothing of any real substance. The Nazis are presented with about as much depth as you might expect. Nazis bad. Yeah, agreed. That's about as far as it goes, and it dips into silly, cliché territory on occasion, with a literal moment near the end where a guy goes something to the effect of, "How could the Nazis pose a threat to Poland?" Come on. And it's wow, it was a little heavy-handed. The weird prophetic dreams he kind of has come out of nowhere are not really expanded on, are barely shown. We see a train and some crabs. Okay. And they don't really go anywhere. I like the effect on them for the ending, but I would have just as easily bought that he was having a fever dream because he's dying of an infection. I don't know, this was just a film. That's all. I kind of regret choosing this as a Werner Herzog film because it's mostly charmless, if not for the strength of some of the acting. It would be essentially worthless. So, no, I can't recommend this film in all good faith, and I'm sad this closes out the month. Well, that was the end of Werner Herzog month, and we ended not with a bang, but with quite a bit of a whimper. What's your favorite World War II film? Let me know down below. Also, hit me up on Instagram under Demon Peaks, where I post daily Twin Peaks memes. Check out my podcast, the Dark Peaks Podcast. We not only go over each episode of Twin Peaks, but we discuss, other crap like crack rock. And don't forget to subscribe to help this channel out. Next month, a real treat. We go away from the artsy-fartsy films that of Herzog or Mr. Harry Dean Stanton can provide. As the entirety of June, all of it, 5 weeks of it, we look at the movies of the immortal one, Hollywood, Hulk Hogan. Starting with what else but Suburban Commando. This has been the Tono Makai, Master of Minds and Men. Thank you very much. And goodbye.